are not approved. Okay, so at this point, we're going to begin our formal presentation, our maintenance and operations 101. And I believe you all know Mr. Slavic, who's been at the committee before. He will walk us through it.
Okay. Full screen though?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
All right.
Awesome. Fantastic. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Nate Slavic. I'm the Senior Director for Maintenance and Operations. Happy to be here with you today to provide a high-level overview of the Maintenance Department. I'm going to provide you with some data about our district, about the Maintenance Department specifically, and about some of the challenges that we face while performing job number one, which for us is keeping the doors open for education. Maintenance department is comprised of 5 internal departments. Life cycle and facility assessments, custodial services, environmental and grounds, regional maintenance, and energy and physical plant. Life cycle and facility assessment departments responsible for the capital replacements of systems and equipment and the assessment and conditions of our facilities. Custodial services responsible for the daily cleaning and disinfection of our buildings. They also perform floor refinishing, carpet cleaning, and deep cleaning of the facilities when they are unoccupied. Environmental and grounds is responsible for building landscaping, playground maintenance, stormwater management systems. They also investigate indoor air quality concerns, manage our asbestos, lead, and waste compliance programs, and control pests at all of our facilities. Regional maintenance is comprised of our jack-of-all-trades staffs. I liken them to building superintendents. These technicians are our first responders to all of our calls and perform both corrective and preventive maintenance. They do everything from fixing building leaks to equipment repairs to changing light bulbs and filters. If repairs become too extensive or need specialized tools or training, the work is then transferred to our energy and physical plant department. Energy and physical plant is comprised of the trade shops. These technicians typically have licenses or certifications to work in their specific fields, such as HVAC, electricians, plumbers, locksmiths, elevators, security, and life safety systems. As you are probably aware, the school system has over 200 locations. It's comprised not only of typical school buildings, but office space, specialty schools, early colleges, and support campuses. We've grown to more than 27 million square feet and have several new facilities in the planning and construction phases. That square footage can be thought of in many ways, from the amount of floors to be cleaned, our ceiling tiles to be maintained, roofing to cover these buildings, while not the entire 27 million, is still a considerable amount. I've called out some specific equipment on this slide to provide an understanding about the critical nature of it and the technicians that service them. As you can see, there are a considerable number of HVAC systems in the district: heating, ventilation, and air conditioning. Many of our boilers and chillers, as you can see, we have 500 boilers, 300 chillers. Many of them are redundant so that we can still operate if there are failures. But while this is beneficial and provides a window of time for maintenance to make repairs, for boilers, there's currently operating with 2 boiler technicians for the entirety of the district. Similarly with our chillers, there's redundancy built in, but when our chillers aren't at full capacity, we lose the ability to maintain temperature set point in the building. We currently have 2 chiller technicians, or 2 positions, both of which are vacant right now, as our last technician retired with more than 33 years of service. Finally, at the bottom is the number of elevators and chair lifts. And while this equipment will not close a facility, it's extremely inconvenient, not only for those who absolutely need them to access areas of the schools, but for general building operations as well. Moving track-out carts, cleaning equipment, and boxes of paper is essential for school operation. We currently have 2 technical positions for elevators, but only 1 is staffed, and we have been unable to find a qualified technician for the other. Grounds. We have 5,200 acres of property that Wake County Public Schools. On this property, we also operate what's essentially a very large park system to provide an outdoor activity space for our students. The grounds department maintains over 400 playground structures, 200 stormwater management devices, miles of tracks, play fields, and expanses of asphalt. It's difficult to quantify these responsibilities similarly as the boilers and chillers, but I'll tell you now that this department is also strained, and we'll talk about their vacancy rates in a moment. Work order statistics for those of you who enjoy math. Depicted here is the average annual breakdown of our work order statistics for the last 5 years. So we have over 165,000 preventive maintenance work orders that are created each year to perform known planned maintenance. Items like changing light bulbs, filters, room and equipment inspections, and monitoring systems for compliance. We have more than 91,000 corrective work orders that are created. These items can be submitted as a result of preventive maintenance work, something that was noted to be broken and cannot be immediately repaired. They can be reported by maintenance staff while performing other tasks, or they can be reported by our customers in the form of a service request or a call to our customer service center. As shown here, our customers generate a little more than half of our corrective work orders. Many of the work orders that are reported by schools are emergency work orders. Calls to customer service stating that the whole school is hot or cold or without power. We'll go over the work prioritization on the next slide. Finally, at the bottom, we provide some details about how we complete our work and our completion rate. If you're doing the math as we progress, it shows that we complete about 90% of our corrective work. This generates a year-to-year backlog that kind of grows over time. The department uses contracted services to provide a substantial amount of work. A considerable amount of our preventive maintenance program is provided by outside vendors, typically due to their technical expertise with certain equipment or the large amount of labor required to perform the task. We also use contractors to perform a substantial amount of corrective work. Now, relatively, 4,800 work orders doesn't seem like a substantial amount of work compared to the overall numbers, but all work orders are not equal. There will be a work order to fix a light. There will also be a work order to replace a failed boiler. So I think we can all agree those are two very different things. I should write the numbers down. You want me to wait a second?
I'm good.
Okay. Okay. We can come back to it if you want. Prioritization. So this is an overview of our work order prioritization system. This is how we go about scheduling work and prioritizing everything. So priority fives are conditions which could be life-threatening, could cause injury to students or faculty, or has completely disabled the equipment or the facility that the equipment supports. That last one is the majority of our priority fives. This is when we have equipment failures. These conditions must be addressed in less than 1 day. These are immediate needs. Examples for this type of work are, again, no heat or cooling in the entire building or a substantial part to the building, loss of power or other utilities, access control issues or exterior door problems, or elevator entrapments. Priority 4 is a condition that adversely affects the equipment or facility, the safety, or prohibits use of the facility if not corrected within 1 to 7 days. So this would be our single classroom, HVAC, minor plumbing problems, minor alarm repairs, intercom malfunctions, redundant equipment repair. Priority 3 is work that's performed as in routine and general nature and does not threaten personal safety or use of the facility. Work should be completed in 8 to 29 days. Some examples are inoperable light fixtures, loose door handles, minor roof leaks, damaged ceiling tiles, key requests. All of our preventive maintenance is priority 3. Priority 2 is work that should be completed, work to be completed and includes non-routine and short and long-term improvements to facilities, equipment, or maintenance-related conditions. Should be completed 30 to 59 days. And some examples are auditorium or gymnasium lighting where adequate lighting still exists, floor tile replacement, small drywall repair, cracked glass. And finally, priority 1 is work that doesn't impact learning or safety. These items may impact the appearance of a campus or reduce general deterioration. So this work is scheduled to be 60 to 180 days. Examples include mulch, paint, carpet repair, and other largely cosmetic work. All right. Staffing challenges. Our number 1 job is to keep the doors open. Providing a progressive learning environment is challenging on an everyday basis. One of our largest challenges is recruitment and retention of staff. Currently, we're experiencing staffing deficiencies in a few key areas. Energy and physical plant. As I stated earlier, these are our licensed trade positions. We have 17 of 70 positions that are vacant. Also, as shown on the previous slide, we have a substantial amount of heating and cooling equipment that's essential for operation. The staff that's responsible for its upkeep and repair has 8 technicians working, which is only half of the available positions in the department. We find that these positions remain vacant due to a large disparity between our pay scale and that of the private sector. Custodial services is another department that struggles to find and retain staff. The number shown on this slide represents the vacancy in the central services portion of custodial services. This is 17 of 71 positions. This may not be the staff that's allocated to a facility, but represents the pool of unassigned staff that is utilized as backups, substitutes, additional assistance, and oversight. These vacancies make it difficult for us to cover school-based staff sick days, vacations, and vacancies with people to perform day-to-day activities. Grounds department is currently missing 5 of their 12 positions that repair playgrounds, manage regulated stormwater devices, deliver mulch, and monitor landscaping contractors. Not only do we need to fill these existing positions, but additional positions are needed to address growing stormwater device regulation, the maintenance of our playground structures, and the landscaping needs of our campuses. As the department receives additional funding, we plan to utilize it to create additional positions, not only to self-perform work, but to manage outside vendors that will be providing additional contracted services. Historical maintenance budgeting. Shown here, obviously, is the budgeting in the past for the maintenance department. 2009-2010 budget was the peak in maintenance spending prior to years of tightened budgets following the recession. So you can see in 2009-2010, we were spending $4.41 a square foot on our facilities. But for the next 10 years, the budget per square foot would remain below $4. It's important also to understand that $4.41 that we were spending in 2009-2010 is not the same as $4.41 today. The current valuation of that $4.41 is now $6.18. So that will lead us into our budgeting benchmark. So the current replacement value shown on this slide is the amount of current dollars that it would cost to duplicate the entire portfolio of existing facilities. This valuation is provided by our insurance company every year. The industry standard for maintenance and repair of facilities ranges from 2 to 4%, depending on the conditions of the building. Based on the wide range of buildings in our portfolio and the amount of deferred maintenance over the last 10 to 12 years, the maintenance budget goal is 3%. Maintenance has requested a multi-year phase-in of additional funds to reach this goal, as immediate implementation would not only carry a very high sticker shock, but also be difficult to implement in one fiscal year. This additional funding will be largely allocated to providing services that have been cut in favor of essential services over the lean budget years. Also for reference, and I know it's not on the slide, but I went back and did some historical looking. Maintenance budgeting prior to the 2009-2010 school year was typically between 3.5% and 4% of the current replacement value. Service strategies. These are some of the examples of how we're striving to provide the most efficient service with the resources that we currently have. Our customer service staff is available 24/7, 365. It's a staff member all time, either by our customer service staff during regular hours or by security staff after hours. Maintenance staff is always on call. Usually I am too. Our preventive maintenance program goal is to minimize the required corrective maintenance. If we maintain our equipment regularly and replace parts that are designed to wear out, we can minimize the need for more severe repairs. We've recently been reviewing our procedures for scheduling our work and assigning out staff. Scheduling the various types and amounts of work we have is complicated. We've made improvements to our process that include taking care of minor issues as they are found as part of our preventive maintenance rather than returning regularly for corrective. Our technicians report directly to their first job every day. We do not report to Rock Quarry Road to begin each day. This ensures that staff that the maximum amount of time is spent performing work in our facilities. And as stated before, we use a lot of contracted services to supplement our labor. Considerations not only placed on the expertise of a vendor, but on the amount of labor that can be provided by the vendor. Larger jobs that require multiple technicians may be sent to vendors so that our staff can be ready to address emergencies or multiple other work orders at the same time. Customer communications. Communications with all of our customers is a difficult task in and of itself due to the volume of information. As such, we've developed several reports that are sent to the school administration regularly. Our weekly maintenance schedules notify staff of our planned work for the week on their campus. Monthly service request reports provide the administrators a list of work that they've submitted, as well as the current status for that work. This eliminates the need for school staff to create their own process for keeping track of this information. When work is completed or canceled, the requester gets an automated email from our work order system with the notes that were contained in the work order describing the situation. We provide service request confirmation emails, just like we're all used to when you order something online, letting our customers know that we've received their request. Our monthly custodial inspections are sent to the schools so they know how well cleaning staff is performing their work. And finally, we send out our facility fact sheet annually to provide an overview of the work orders performed at the school and how it compares by type to the other facilities in the district. I know it's small. We can get it to you if you'd like to see them in more detail. This is an example of our annual facility fact sheet, which is generated for each school and shared with school administration. The report shows an annual work order history for all work submitted. This one is from July 1, 2021 through June 30, 2022 for Adams Elementary. The comparison data at the bottom of the report is by type of school, elementary, middle, and high, and school staff can compare their work order data with the averages across the district. Our team sends this out as an email to all principals with a link to Facility Facts folder, and this report is available to anyone with a Wake County Public Schools Google account. Customer service, as I stated before, this is the most important number for maintenance in the district, far more important than mine. Any work can be called into customer service line, emergency or not. This number is monitored 24/7, 365 by maintenance or security staffing. Customers can also either call this number or utilize the email address to get status updates on existing service requests or work orders at their facility. Maintenance and operations is one of many support functions within Wake County Public Schools. We believe it's our responsibility to provide a safe and desirable learning environment for both students and staff, and to enable principals and school-based staff to focus on learning and teaching. And with that, I'm happy to answer any of your questions. Maintenance 101.
All right, thank you, Mr. Slavic. So some important takeaways I got from that, in addition to just the mechanics, no pun, of how the department is run, I hope everyone noted the vacancies. And I want to make sure that we connect the dots when we talk about the superintendent's recommended budget. There's an item in there, maintenance and operating standards. That specifically addresses what Mr. Slavic was talking about in terms of the amount of money invested in terms of trying to get that back up to the industry standard. Is that correct, Superintendent?
Those dollars are primarily the work and the stuff and the contracts, not people.
Not even the people.
We typically allocate those funds directly to contract because that's the way we can implement them into the facility the quickest. I think going forward, we would also be looking at how do we convert some of those dollars into positions.
I do think those are parallel paths. And the reliance on the contracts versus the people is a interesting dichotomy and dynamic as well. The contracts are necessary because we don't have the salaries and the staff to pay the people, which doesn't actually help us
Yeah.
to build our internal capacity to potentially be more responsive. So we do have to pay attention to, as we move forward, balancing. And I'm not sure that we have anybody in here from finance who could answer that question about the extent to which we might want to look at using some of the funds as we grow to either increase positions or address salaries, especially in the trades.
So then it's not just filling these vacancies, it's for the actual work. That's what that budget funding and budget adjustment would cover. Okay. 24% energy and physical plant, 50% in key HVAC, 24% vacancy in custodial, 40% vacancies in our grounds crews.
Correct.
That's what I heard. And then I also noticed on your senior staff, there was an administrator and a director position that were also vacant.
Correct.
Without getting too far into the budget side of it, but that is important. Have we had these vacancies at about this rate prior to COVID and the pandemic, or have they gotten even worse?
I think you're looking at, I think there's two different reasons. When you look at the technical trades, we are competing with a lot of other organizations for a very limited pool of qualified technicians. So salaries really do come into question. I think the other part, when you're talking about maybe our grounds and our custodial services, it's similar to the issues that we have with transportation and child nutrition, where the pool of people who are out there just isn't out there for some reason. So yeah, I don't think there's a single answer across the board.
And then finally, let me think of how to phrase this. really in terms of paying for these positions and looking at salaries and what grades that they would be. Is this a situation where we get the funding we need from the state? Is this one where we have to supplement locally? Or, where might we find some relief in trying to trying to help fill these positions? I know what you said was, if I heard you, was some of it was salary, but then some of it was also just scarcity in the labor market.
Yeah, I don't get down into that level of the budget as far as where the funding comes from.
I think this is primarily local funding.
Okay.
Yeah. There are several areas in the district that are primarily local. This would be one of them. Technology services would be another one that are largely locally funded.
All right. Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Slavic? Ms. Edmonds?
Thank you. First and foremost, this is really, really very helpful. So I've got 3 questions for you. On slide 9, the second point about the 3% is not clear to me. I didn't really understand that. Can you explain that again, please?
Sure. So industry standard when developing your maintenance budget is shown as a percentage of your replacement value for that building. And again, it's a window. Replacement value for a building that's 50 years old is X, but it still requires more maintenance because it's 50 years old. So using that industry standard to develop our budget, just it's very difficult to kind of put a thumb in the air and say we should give maintenance X. So again, that's just an industry standard to relate it to your portfolio for your buildings.
It's a potential target.
Okay.
So what you're saying here is the current replacement value of our assets, our building assets, is $4.8 billion. The industry standard is that 3% of that current replacement value would be what your operating budget is, and that would be $145 million. And our current operating budget is $118.
Okay. Thank you. That's helpful. Second question, I just wanted to confirm with the grounds staff and specifically related to playgrounds. Hey, Swift Creek. We don't have the staff, we don't put on staff people that actually build and replace playgrounds. Rather, the people in that department would work on playgrounds.
Correct.
The playgrounds are constructed or moved or what have you by contractors.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes. So that staff is responsible for making repairs. We have a third party come in and do our safety inspections, and they will refer repairs to us. We use contracted vendors also to go out there and make some repairs. It's a pretty specialized field, so it's tough to find contractors or people who have experience doing it. But yeah, it's a definite need.
And if I could just add one additional piece here is, y'all please correct me. We have people and we have contracts to support inspections, determining needs for repairs, but there's not line item in any budget for replacements.
Correct.
That is why you find things like PTAs or others raising funds or matching grants or other things to replace playground equipment. That is not a line item that's currently part of our CIP.
That's helpful too. Thank you. And my final question is, what kind of relief did y'all get with students off campus during 2020, 2021? Because my understanding was that you were able to catch up on a lot of things, but I don't know how these shortages, just if you could talk about that.
Yeah, I think I did some actual research on that, but we were able to get into some of our backlog, which was nice. I don't have numbers specifically, but I noticed when looking at our backlog that we it helped us renorm a little bit, helped us get back to a manageable amount of work at every facility. And then obviously without having staff and students in the building, we're not having as many of those service requests come in. But again, as soon as staff and students come back, it starts again.
Sure.
So we were able to dig into that backlog, but over the last year, it's been business as usual again.
I'd be interested to know more about that,
Okay.
if y'all could bring that back, if it's okay with you, to another meeting. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Mr. Hershey?
Going back to the vacancies, you mentioned the need for licensed and qualifications. Are we working with Wake Tech or any local schools to develop our own or grow that
Yes, we've recently been in conversations with the Career and Technical Department, working with them to try and get some internships developed. Vernon Malone specifically has an HVAC tech program with Wake Tech. The challenge we face there is that we are one of many who go over there to talk to those kids about starting a career. And again, the larger contractors in the area do have the ability to start them at a different salary than we can.
Can you put a number on that salary difference, just so everyone understands?
I don't know that I can.
We'll also say that because in the early college program, the students are under 18 for the most part as they begin to do some of this work. There are some insurance risk management things that need to be put in place as we consider internships. So, because I do think, if we could keep everyone that was in the program, first of all, it still wouldn't be enough.
Right.
But they might stay, and I think a lot of times we've seen this dichotomy of people who have 30 plus years and can go whenever they want to, and 20-year-olds who'll stay with us until they get married, have a family, and decide they need more money. So
And it's not just us.
Right.
I spoke with a Brady train rep over the last 2 days, and they can't get people either, and they're paying a lot more than we are.
Okay, that's good.
It's just hard to find
Yeah.
people that are interested in doing it.
Okay.
But I have had conversations with Wake Tech about how, in their efforts to grow those programs, how the school system can be at the table for providing support for their students that are in the programs.
Okay.
Everybody wants them.
Sure.
I would just say that.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's it.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Ng?
This is a wild idea, but I mean, has anybody talked about in the past, over the years, other places, about having a magnet program for trade, or like
Yeah.
teaching, electrical, teaching plumbing? Right.
So our early colleges are under the magnet office.
Okay.
And so one of the things that became apparent, and I went through this myself a little over 20 years ago when I became the principal of a high school that had a vacancy in a trades program that I could not fill. And eventually had to let go of the program, which now exists in some form in a couple of schools, but also in the early colleges. The technology, the equipment required to keep those programs up to date is out of the roof. As things become more computerized and all these other things, and so just keeping up with the cost was not efficient. For example, to put an automotive repair class in every high school. So it became only certain high schools, and then they had trouble finding people because we can't pay them as much as they get paid somewhere else. So then it becomes a program in an early college. We currently have 4 early colleges with Wake Tech, and don't know what we're going to call or do over in the eastern Wake part of the campus. One is health field focused. The new one in RTP is sort of biopharma tech focused. And then North Wake College and Career and Vernon Malone are trades focused.
Okay. I wasn't aware of those. So
Yeah. So we have 2 that are trades focused. And we have a robust CTE program at a lot of our schools where students do receive and have industry certifications that they can, but not so much in the trades. They are super expensive to maintain. And so I think if Wake Tech is game, there's certainly space for more of that collaboration specifically in the trades.
Right, and concentrating in one place, maybe would it help with the cost of it?
Yeah, it could, yes, and that's why we've got the early colleges.
Right.
But we may need more that are trades focused.
Yeah, right. And
If I may just piggyback on that, the early trade colleges, that the application radius is larger, right?
Yes.
Than-
It's the whole district.
Is it countywide?
Yeah, it's
Okay.
countywide.
Okay.
It's not, the transportation can be a little difficult
Sure.
because they tend to be, like, go to a hub and then go from the hub to the school kind of thing. Or even potentially like neighborhood stops, it's not door neighborhood, but like sort of regional stops for pickup.
I thought they might be countywide. I thought
They are, but
that
they are
might
countywide, yes.
help Dr. Ng, like with the,
And we tried to not duplicate every program at Vernon Malone at North Wake because there are so many options, but those make those programs very singular in terms of serving countywide. So there is space for more possibly regional, if we can find the students to do so. Because even within those trades programs, for example, at Vernon Malone College and Career Academy, there's a HVAC, is there a welding? There's a welding, auto shop, but their most popular program is their computer-based animation. That one has a waiting list. So,
yeah, see, all those things are just, sound so sexy, the computer programming or all those things. But, when you come down to like plumbing
Yeah.
or electrical, I mean, it doesn't seem as sexy. But hey, I can't find an electrician.
That's right.
Well, I think,
That's right.
we saw with the shed competition, if you go over,
Yeah.
when that's at Cary High, they also have the Volt competition, and I know a lot of our CTE programs have participated or spent the past weekend doing Skills USA competitions, and they get nabbed up pretty quickly by, I think there's demand for it. It's just a matter of being responsive to, maybe in a work session, we can bring in Joanne Honeycutt to talk about CTE programming.
Yeah, like you've seen how in some of the athletes will have their signing days
Yeah.
where they select their hats.
Right.
Our CTE program has a wonderful signing day for high school students going straight into like a trades career, where
Right.
they come out and they have their parents and they really celebrate it. And yeah, it's a good one to go to if you ever have time. So a lot of great stuff on some of the HVAC options and developing the internal talent. Any other questions on this one, Dr. A? Ms. Caulfield?
I guess they're just, as far as the vacancies, it does seem very problematic. I mean, if you don't have somebody there, you can't get the job done, and then you have loss of either services or spaces. As far as the salary, and I'm not sure if you were talking about one avenue specifically that they are paid, that the outside companies pay more than us, or if that was in general. But do we have any other exit interviews or any other reasons why, if our, besides the salary, why we have such a, I mean, that's a pretty high vacancy, in a lot of different categories for you, so.
It is. I think, as stated, these technicians are in high demand, and especially if you're younger, you may not be thinking about your pension when you can make an additional X number of dollars an hour right now. So it's difficult to compete sometimes.
What Nate is alluding to there is public school system employees are required to participate in the pension plan. So even whatever your hourly rate is diminished by the percentage that you're required to contribute to the retirement plan. And we have found more and more with younger folks that they prefer to save on their own if they're going to and have access to the funds and not be required to participate. So it just sort of further reduces because the ability to see the benefit of having a required pension plan differs with folks that are in different places. Yeah.
And don't forget about the health insurance. That's another component of this. You don't hear about it as much now, but we do have those conversations where the state changed the health insurance for state employees, and that's a factor as well.
It changed it, meaning that the health insurance is worse? Or the
Well, yeah.
benefits are lower?
Yes, the benefit is not what
Right.
it used to be.
Okay. And,
And that applies for all employees.
Right, and so like when we put together our package, it includes benefits, like contribution to a retirement system, health benefits, option for vision, dental, that sort of thing. And what you're finding is a labor force, labor market that prefers the salary over the benefits in many cases.
Well, and then think about it too, right? In a number of these professions, you can have people that, as independent contractors, favor setting their own schedule, working the hours they want, as opposed to working, you know, maybe with like a larger company, especially with some of the younger folks. You know, their dream is to have their own company, and maybe they'll apprentice for a year or two with somebody to sort of learn the trade, but really that's the direction rather than like a long-term career with an employer paying a pension.
I do think there's space for us to be more intentional about the benefit of benefits, you know, in terms of our communications. But and you know, it's not everyone. It's just a factor that comes up in
Right.
conversations.
I was just wondering if that is the case, that would kind of be norm. That wouldn't be like we wouldn't have had such an impact, like you mentioned, Ms. Edwards, when it came, was it like this before COVID? Because you mentioned using contractors too. Did our percentages increase in the amount of contractors we have to use? Was it like that before COVID, or?
I don't know how COVID's necessarily impacted. I know we use a lot of contract to fill any of these vacancies. So, for instance, you know, when we only have so many HVAC technicians, we use a lot of contracted services to take care of some of that work. Custodial services is similar. You know, if we don't have staff to fill a school's vacancy or school's absences, we look to one of our contractors to provide labor to help us out.
So that's kind of always been the norm.
It's been part of it, yes. I feel like we're leaning on it in new avenues now. We've always used HVAC because we have so much HVAC work and it's labor intensive, and we've always used a lot of HVAC to supplement. I think we're finding it now in new fields for things that we used to self-perform because of not having the staff on.
And I think it's fair to add, with our increased reliance on outside vendors, our response time isn't what we want it to be, nor our customers. And I think there needs to be some recognition of that.
Right. Because we're now a customer serving customers. Right?
We control our own people. You know, when we have something go wrong, I have a handful of people that go now, as opposed to calling around to see who's available to help us out.
So if we have so many buildings, so many spaces, and it sounds like HVAC would definitely be a pretty common thing that we need, that's not something that we can concentrate more on to have to help with, like, to have our permanent staff versus the contractors? Is it too costly to have that? Is it easier to use the contractors, or you just can't get the staff? I guess is what I'm trying to decide which one is it. We can't find them, or it's too much.
I think we have a hard time competing for those technicians right now from a salary
Yeah,
perspective.
so we can't find them, and we don't pay as well. Both of those are true. We don't want to let go of our internal capacity. We want to build it, and I'm not sure if what you're asking is, what if all grounds went to contract so we could focus on HVAC as being all internal? I'm not sure if that's part of what you're asking, but I think that the answer there is we're always going to want to have internal staff for something, just for the speed of being able to respond, but there's just not enough.
So it makes sense for us financially and for what we need, our needs, to have it. We just can't fill it.
Right.
That's correct.
That's what I'm just
Any other questions?
thinking.
Okay, Chair Mahaffey, did you have any questions for Mr. Slav?
No.
All right then. All right, well, thank you very much. We really appreciate it. We do have that one issue Ms. Evans had asked about. If you can make a note of it, and we'll get up with you at a future time.
Yeah, I looked, and one thing that I did want to mention about the COVID part was, all of our staff wasn't here the whole time either. You know what I mean? So while we were here and we were working, there were still some people in our buildings, but we also had staff that went out with COVID. We had the nature in which some of our organization is grouped. We had one member come up with COVID, so this small group of people all had to go home as a precautionary measure.
Yes.
So while it seems like it was a great opportunity and no one was in our schools, I think we made an improvement, but I don't know if it was as substantial as maybe we think it is.
Okay.
So, but I can dig into that a little bit further for you.
Yeah, thank you.
Fantastic. All right, well, we are transitioning to the next item on the agenda. Mr. Strickland, I see you brought a new friend with you.
Morning.
Is this
You're
part of the team?
Yes, I'd like to recognize Dave Burnett. Dave comes to us from Union County. We get a lot of good people from Union County. I've known Dave for a long time. He's been in the school business for many, many years, run lots of projects. So he's our new assistant superintendent of facilities design and construction. So over the coming months, you'll be seeing more from him and hearing more from him. So welcome Dave aboard.
All right.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for coming today. All right. Our speaker chair has shifted. We now welcome Douglas Condon. Douglas, bring us back to the CIP, and I see the slide up here says final review.
Yes, sir.
Let's see how final the final review
We'll
is.
see. We'll see where we land, right? So for everyone's benefit, first of all, good afternoon. It's good to be with all you again. As we've done the last few years, we come to you at this point in the process, and we spend some time walking through what we have presented, updated, and shared with you all over the course of the last 4 months in each respective year. So that indeed is our purpose this afternoon. Thank you again for your time. At work session last week, when Jack McAleer was here, we were here to present the executive summary version for this year. And so with that, we will start, and then please feel free to pause at any point if there's a question relative to that particular slide, okay? All right. On this slide, what we'd like to do, again, for everyone's benefit, is just take a moment to highlight the importance of the collaboration that goes on both at the county level and district level. As a CIP team, we meet twice a month from the months of January through April, sometimes in May if it calls for it, and then as we get through the CIP season in each respective year, we meet monthly for the months of June through December. And as you can see, very important departments represented here: facilities, design and construction, maintenance and operation, and you certainly had a chance to hear from Nate this afternoon, school choice planning and assignment, finance, academics, and of course our important partner, Wake County. I think it is important to highlight that everyone works hard internally to communicate and collaborate together to ensure that we are all moving in the same direction and trying to execute and produce great product for the district. In this slide, what we'd like to do is take a couple of moments to provide a visual and share where we were and now where we've arrived. So this process each year starts in the fall of that respective year, so you can see some of our components that are important in each year's respective CIP and how we as a team start bringing those topics to our CIP team meetings in the fall. In fact, in October and November and December, even before we turn the calendar, so to speak, and get to that next calendar year, there's a lot of work that's going on in the fourth quarter of the previous year. And those are, from top to bottom, parts and pieces that we've shared with you all over the course of the last few months. Enrollment, the program assumptions, which again is our guiding document for our capital improvement plan, our standards and guidelines, the important cost model, any updates, of course, to that we bring to you, And then, of course, here we are today to share with you how we've charted this process, where we've started, where our progress is, and how we have arrived at today. There was a joint meeting between both boards recently at the end of March to discuss topics that were relative and important to both boards, which is always important. There was a time when that relationship was not as strong and healthy as it is today, so we're very fortunate to have a strong relationship with Wake County, who does provide the funding that we need to run this program. When we were with you in February, we shared with you a historical update about the prioritization process as it relates for our major renovations. This slide visualizes and depicts those 4 components of the formula. Of course, it reflects to you that the campus building condition is our anchor because it's our highest percentage. Health and safety is certainly a close second at 35. One of the comments that we received from the previous board last year was a request for more balance in the CIP with respect to more emphasis on major renovations. We were able to do that and are pleased that we could do that. That's not to say then that we take our eye off the ball with new construction, right? So we do have parts of our county that are still experiencing some pretty tremendous growth, and as such, new construction continues. But it is important to note that in a district of this size, there are campuses and buildings that do need attention, and this process is the process that we utilize to determine the recommendations that we have made to you all in the past and will continue to do so in the future. The non-visual, but just a real quick slide to give you an appreciation of the timeline, kind of where we started when we did turn that calendar for this year, 2023, and where we are today. Program assumptions. So the program assumptions, this was something we brought to you in January. They are our guiding document for our capital improvement plan. I will not run through each of these individually as we spent a lot of time in talking them and reviewing them with you in depth in January. I will say that these particular updates are more language in nature. There are no material changes that were recommended to you all back in January. It is an important document. It guides us as it relates to our design, our construction, major renovations, our capacity, and so it is a very important document as it relates to how we run our district, how we have our rolling 7-year capital improvement plan, and it really serves as the framework for what we do every day.
Real quick, may I? So slides 7 and 8, the italicized, those are references to the document. Okay.
It is. So that gives you the specific area of the document and the location. Thank you. As we talk about our program standards, legs, and guidelines, we do have an annual process whereby we accept requests for changes in that. And again, there are always changes in language or changes that are requests that do not create cost impact. So for the 3rd consecutive year, we are pleased to report that in this particular area, there were no changes that created cost impact, which again, in an environment that we're certainly dealing with right now, that is good news. All right, moving into the executive summary. Again, this hits upon what we did at work session last week. This is the 2023 version of our executive summary, the capital improvement plan. This first slide speaks to the new construction section. And as Jack highlighted last week with you all, there is one recommendation. For a number of years, as you may know, the Capitol Boulevard site, the Bobby Murray site, was on our plan. It's shown here. It did have funding. As we reported last week, we do not have a defined plan from academics. And as a result, we felt that it would be prudent to recommend to you all, we're not adding funding, but we're simply taking funding that is existing, and moving it and naming Cary High School, which, as you all are well aware, is high on the radar. We've had many discussions about last year when we did name schools. As you all are well aware, last year was a bond year, and it was important to name several schools to make it clear to the voters where we were showing that balance all over our county, all over our district. And so as a result, Cary High School and Athens Drive High School were neck and neck. Athens Drive was awarded on the plan. Cary was not. However, it was really, to be honest with you, it was more of a 1A and a 1B. Okay? It was that close. So as a result, we'll just stress again, as we did last week, that this slide reflects the major renovations in our plan. Here you can see Cary High School highlighted in yellow. So again, not a funding change, exactly how it was last year in terms of the dollars. But we are recommending that Cary High School be included in this plan. Okay? Now, important to note at the bottom of this slide as well, you'll notice the 4 green existing TBD slots. Those are slots for schools in future years. So if you look to the far right of the slide, you'll see the out years of the plan, FY29 and FY30 respectively. So that's when you start to see those design dollars. When you see these smaller amounts reflected, those are your design dollars, and certainly as you see the larger numbers, those are the construction dollars for that respective project. So you'll see that start to show up at the back end of our 7-year plan. As we discussed last week, it does not necessarily mean that there will be 4 schools. There are 4 slots. And so, as we can all appreciate, the largest number of component of schools we have in our district are elementary schools, okay? However, as we get a little bit closer to these years, there might be a discussion and a realization that there's a middle school that needs attention, right? And so as a result, these 4 slots, right, might really convert into 2 elementary schools and 1 middle by virtue of the cost that it requires to do a major renovation for a middle school, okay? Here we have the slide that speaks to the program requirements in our 7-year rolling plan. A lot of what was discussed earlier this afternoon with Nate certainly can be, you can see the line item for the life cycle building, okay? And how we certainly desperately need more dollars to focus on the needs of our district. We have 55 schools in this district that are over 40 years old, right? We've talked about the top 25, but that doesn't mean there aren't others that need attention, right? Okay? So it's very simply, talks about the life cycle items, talks about important components like our tech devices, security, something we talk about constantly, right? We know security is serious. It's an issue out there. It's a sensitive topic. This is in here. We have our temporary classrooms. We have our land component, certainly. We have our SNAP program and our print program. Now, in that print program, we are able to address some, and I use that in air quotes, of those smaller facility modifications requests, but these are not major renovations or full renovations. They're just simply the dollars, as you can see. When you look in the print category, the good news is as we get down the road a couple of years, that funding is going to increase, which is good news. But again, when you talk about the cost in present time to do a major renovation, that wouldn't even cover one, excuse me. So, we're trying to hit some of the smaller things, which equally important, right? This slide certainly provides our totals, so you can see the 7-year totals for what would be this year's plan. $595 million and change for our new school category, $935 for our existing schools, just under $1.2 billion for our program requirements, and that brings us to a grand total of $2,788 million and some change. Game plan moving forward, provided that everybody in the room today is good with us proceeding forward, we would come back with you all on Tuesday of next week at work session to do a formal presentation of this 2023 CIP, provided that you give us the thumbs up at work session. As has been done in the past, the game plan would be that it would then go on consent at that evening's regular board meeting. Okay? So with that, happy to open it up and take any questions you may have.
All right, thank you, Douglas. So at this point, I know we've reviewed the CIP several times. I know several of you have asked many good questions. We've gotten another look at it, a few little adjustments, but is there anything that stands out this time that you have an outstanding question about? Ms. Caulfield.
The last slide that you showed, and I know we've seen these slides before, so each time a little bit more of it gets absorbed, so I apologize
okay.
if you've gone over it.
Sure.
So obviously, your new schools, your existing schools, I get that program requirement total. So what falls into that? Because that's a pretty big number.
Yes, of course. So let's go back another slide, okay? And as we said in those program requirements, we have
All
several
of
categories
those.
like the life
Got
cycle,
it.
security,
Right.
crimp, et cetera.
I think I was looking too much at the numbers and not the headings.
That's okay.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Chairman Haffey.
I just had a couple technical questions to the question that Ms. Edmonds posed earlier about referencing the modifications that were approved for the program assumptions. It just helps if there's either like a hyperlink in the document or that document attached simply so
Sure.
that we can reference that.
Sure.
Because I remember that we saw it. I couldn't tell you off the top of my head that it was in January.
I was
Yeah.
looking to see if there were links, yeah.
Understood.
And then on page 10, I know we have a lot of parents that know when a school is, being constructed. I just drove past Bockham. It looks very different today than it did a couple weeks ago. But not having Felton Grove or Rex Road on that slide, was that,
That's because the funding for those schools
Okay.
was provided in previous years.
okay, that was my assumption, but
Okay.
I'm just making sure that
Yeah? Good question.
I don't want to make assumptions.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Dr. Ing.
It's not so much a question, but a comment. With the money reserved for the existing or to be determined, I kind of, now that I've been in this for a little bit, I see where, people, the squeaky wheel tries to get more grease. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly what you're saying.
And so how do you balance that? You're trying to meet the needs of the people who are, seeing the need for something. But then how do you balance it out with not being, subject to all the, having to put out the squeaky wheel, put the oil on the squeaky wheel?
So having been involved in some of that squeaky wheel conversation, I'd like to answer part of that. When we did the assessments with the 55 schools with significant square footage, 30 years old or older, that was our baseline for looking at schools that we needed to renovate. They are our older schools, systems and things were out. And so the prioritization list that we put together formed the basis of the work for the schools that we would do, the existing schools that we would move forward with. There are other schools that are kind of in between that need some help and need some work. That, by and large, falls upon both our maintenance and operations staff and life cycle. And so as you've heard, our maintenance and operations staff, we're limited in many ways, money and personnel, so there are things that we struggle to get to. Same thing with life cycle, although we're getting a bump in life cycle next year, the pricing has gone up significantly, so we don't anticipate getting a lot of extra things done. So we do have some some categories of schools, I think, that fall kind of in between that need some attention. It's just a matter of resource allocation.
TLC.
TLC.
Chairman Heffy, you had something to add?
Yeah, I just want to say when it comes to, because I know we like to know what's coming next, right? And so those green boxes on slide 11 can sometimes be a little nerve-wracking because you're like, I want to know what it's going to be, I want to know what it's going to be. But when I came on the board, one of the, and when I was running, one of the first conversations I had was, well, Fuquay High School was supposed to be renovated back in 2008. And then here are the plans for what it was supposed to be, or, because people get invested in when they're getting a new school or getting a renovation. And also things change. So in my time on the board, East Wake Middle School, which is now Neuse River, was on a septic system, and that just got a full tear down renovation rather than just fixing, the building envelope that it had. And West Millbrook was another one where we didn't foresee that one coming, but based on things that had happened, had to move up in that priority list. So what we're hearing with like Cary High School moving, it's that renovation piece and putting aside a future. So there's flexibility in there in those later months, and it can be frustrating, but I don't generally see it as a squeaky wheel so much as like, we no longer have schools that are on a septic system. So, yeah.
Well, if I can redirect.
Yes, please.
I think what you've observed is just something natural about like the dynamic of an elected board, right?
Mm-hmm.
Everyone will come to their board members to point out, hey, this school needs HVAC help. This school, needs paint, or we really want a major tear down. We want a brand new school, and so you'll see people come to the board table. You'll see people come to public comment and talk about those needs. But because we don't want to be making all of our decisions just based on who's the loudest, right? That's why we have the whole prioritization rubric. And even though it says existing to be determined, we don't know, in 2029, where people will be on that rubric. But I think we'll still have the rubric to guide us. And so you'll see in future meetings, when we look at some of the schools that are proposed, we'll know that they're coming to us based on that rubric. We'll still have, like Chairman Haffey said, the flexibility that we can move stuff around. But I think staff's doing a good job of going in and evaluating and really helping give us some objective information. One of the things they did a couple years ago, Chairman Haffey will remember this, is they did the scoring for all of the needs, and they brought us all the scores, but they didn't list the school names.
Yes,
And so they made us take a look, right?
You mentioned that, yes.
Yeah. And then when you really saw what those needs were and you didn't have the bias of this is one that you see in your neighborhood every day, you tended to make some decisions that if you had known which schools it might have been or had louder voices behind them, you might have decided a different way. So I'm kind of more in favor of the data-driven model, but knowing that we do have flexibility in case something did come up that we didn't foresee.
Our challenge is to bring something to you all and put ourselves in a defensible position. We will bring you something that we can defend, and where it goes from there, may be another discussion.
Yeah.
Was that an
Marcus shared in-
exercise?
I'm sorry, I was just going to say, Marcus shared in previous meetings, part of that homework behind the scenes is going on and doing feasibility studies of these schools in the top 25 to get objective information from consultants who could say, hey, here's what you've got, here's what's okay, here's what is not reusable, and then we can bring to you all as the supporting documentation, as Mark has indicated, and is defensible. It's objective. It's not subjective, as Dr. Rang suggested. Maybe we can get into some treacherous waters when things get subjective and other things come into play. So we're trying to come and be as objective as possible.
So, and I do want to get back to you, but just to add on to this because it's relevant, I know the superintendent had to slip out because of a conflict, but something that we've talked to the superintendent about, Mr. Hershey brought up the idea, was if we could get as a board just, some, like you almost said, like a one-pager
one-page document
or a summary
that just
on,
kinda has.
these are kind of where those priorities are and what those needs are so that we can talk intelligently about it and explain, yes, you need a new sidewalk, but this school needs a new sewer system, right? or just sort of, because I think most people are rational. They might want things at their school, but if they really understood the needs of some others, they'd understand the decision-making better. And just to be able to, educate us, equip us with some of those tools will help us as we go in the community. Did you have anything else on
I think
that?
just like a few bullet points of the big things. Like I don't want, not the whole document, I mean, that's way too weeds, right? But if you're talking about a school and I can click on the PDF and it pulls it up and it's got the 4 bullet points, now it kind of helps. So if I'm looking at one of my schools, I can, similar to the safety and security assessments, not as detailed though.
Are you looking for like existing schools that we have on the list now?
Yeah, like
and what is proposed for them, like a North Garner, Lockhart, schools that are on the list
Not necessarily
already?
proposed, but here are the issues here's our top 25. Here are the 5 issues at each school that are the big issues. I don't know.
Well, I
Without
think
creating
that's
a
hard
lot of
because you
work.
kind
Yeah.
of get in like,
like
you kind of
apples
get
and
into a
oranges.
match between,
Yeah.
like then it becomes who's the squeaky wheel. Maybe we can move up if we put pressure on things. Because I know we all have,
The intent is not to do that.
I know that's not the intent, but
Well,
But
what
the
about
intent
what
is to
you
be
just said that
informed.
you had in the past where you were able to see without the names? You know, like I know that we had this conversation once before and we were talking about Cary Middle School, I think it was. And I was like, well,
West-
Wake Forest
West-
Elementary School is like, I think 100 years old, and I'm not joking either.
There is a portion of that campus that is 100 years old.
Yeah.
And so
It's kind of like there's a lot of schools out there that need a lot of things, and you guys have some kind of. I'm
We have the
sure,
rubric
right,
of going
of
through.
how you're going through it, and I think we're kind of looking at a chart, wondering like, I know the growth that's happening up in Wake Forest, and I'm looking at them going, okay, we're talking about the year 30, and I see
So-
elementary schools, but
So-
where's all these kids going to high school?
So keep
Like-
in mind, at the top part of the document, in the new schools, that effort is driven with school choice planning and assignment to tell us where the growth is. So that is a part of this, but it is a separate part. So we have identified that we will need 2 elementary schools at some point in time. Where they are located is a different process.
So you already have an idea of like a projected growth.
We have a
of
projected
students.
growth. You all have heard growth projections in the past.
Yeah.
What we don't have is where those schools will be located. That's done through a different process.
And that's something we can look at in another meeting, right? You'll see like heat maps of areas where we think we'd like a school in this area, but then that's all subject to the ability of land, subject to the availability of land for sale in that area, and then the funds to purchase the land. So real quick, I want to get back. Ms. Evans, did you have something you wanted to add? And then I'll go back to Dr. Ing.
About the exercise that you did where you the board members got to rate blind without knowing the names of the schools, that seems like an excellent exercise for us as a largely new members to participate in. And I was just wondering, was that a facilities committee activity, or was it at a work session with the full board, or, because it sounds great, I think.
So what it was it was part of a presentation. It was an update on the prioritization, where that respective year's top 25, we took a graph and we graphed, I think it was the top 5 or 6, okay? And then we showed where they fell in, and we did not name them. They were
Right.
school 1, school 2, etc. We used that as a tool to show, here's where we are, here's some of where the top 6 schools
Yeah.
are, and no names were named until
Right.
after the process, and we said, okay, and these are, and
Something like that. I'm not at all talking about your rubric.
Yeah.
I'm not suggesting we
yeah.
do a sample or anything of that.
Sure.
But it just sounds like a great exercise.
And keep in mind, too, throughout this entire process, we are looking at things that you all may not see.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Things that, as Nate always says, they keep the doors open. That is our first charge. So that's, our lens is towards that first and foremost. There are some cosmetic and superficial things that may not look great, but we need to take care of the behind-the-scenes stuff first.
All right, any further questions for Mr. Condon? All right, thank you. Okay, everybody, so we're at the point on the agenda for new business, and this is a facilities-related issue. I brought it up at the board meeting, and I wanted to kind of introduce the topic here to figure out where we might go with it. The state legislature in the House budget has a proposal that would require taking our class size limits that we have from kindergarten through third grade and adding a new limit for grades 4 and 5. And the original proposal would have been that these would have to have gone into effect this next year, but thankfully they've given us a year. So that'll help us prepare for it. But again, it's still not final. We don't know what the Senate will do. We don't know if they will adopt the same proposal as the House. We don't know if they'll adopt a different one. And then we'll have to see how the two budgets reconcile. But the potential for these class size limits could have a huge impact on our school district in terms of requiring more classrooms. And I guess that Ms. Rory is here, and we have other staff here. I wanted to look at this just from a facilities point of view. We know if you have to, take a group of, classroom of, say, 30 kids and divide them into 2 classrooms, that you would need a new teacher, right? So there would be hiring costs associated with it. But right now, just looking at facilities impact. Ms. Rory, have you had a chance, you all know Ms. Marcella Rory with long-term planning. Have you had a chance to kind of review the proposal, and what are some things that we as a school system would need to look at and evaluate if this were to pass?
Great. Thank you, Mr. Haggerty and board members, for allowing us a little bit of time to start the initial conversation. Many of you are familiar or have heard of House Bill 259, and right now I have a copy of version 3, and this is addressed in section 7.21D, class size reduction for our 4th and 5th grade classes. Many of you may remember and have seen multiple presentations that Long Range Planning has brought forward to you, and we've shared information on what the impact was with the initial legislation that reduced the class sizes in K-3 classrooms. The initial legislation immediately reduced our capacity by 559 fewer classrooms and approximately 9,500 fewer seats. However, the initial legislation gave a runway for implementation. And as Mr. Haggerty just mentioned, this legislation was initially supposed to go into effect when school starts for this summer for the 2023-24 school year. What you may or may not remember is that for the full implementation of the initial legislation, we had to go back and reset the capacities for all of those schools. One of the things that you have also seen in several long-range planning presentations is a copy of a capacity model. So you're familiar with the fact that for our K through 3 classes, we typically provide more classrooms at those grade levels than we do at 4th and 5th grade, because we do have the ability to put additional students in our 4th and 5th grade classes. So now, with this legislation, our 4th and 5th grade classes currently reflect, our capacities for those rooms currently reflect anywhere between 23 to 30 students per class. Some of our 4th and 5th grade classrooms have as many as 30 to 31 students per classroom. So I guess you asked the question, what is that immediate impact? So for 4th grade, we would be looking at a little bit over 700 seats reduction at 4th grade and a little bit over 1,000 seat reduction at 5th grade. Now, that may sound a little bit simple, but it's not, because the other challenge is your cohorts as they age forward. So as I spoke with Mr. Haggerty just before the meeting started, I said, okay, we'll give an example of a school that has 120 students in a 3rd grade class. When that cohort ages forward, based off of the new legislation at this particular unnamed school, I only have enough seats for 96 fourth graders aging forward. So even with a +3, and right now we are assuming that there will be a +3 waiver for 4th and 5th, similar to the +3 waiver for K through 3. So we're making a lot of assumptions here. We would still, in this particular scenario, only have 108 seats available at 4th grade. So I've immediately, at this particular unnamed school, have a shortage of about 12 seats for rising 3rd going to 4th grade students. So in that example, I'm sitting here trying to stick to my notes. We've also shared in recent presentations some of the challenges and some of the utilization changes we have made at all of our elementary schools in order to accommodate the reductions at K through 3. So you remember the capacity model, and we talked about above the line versus below the line, and taking non-capacity spaces from below the line and utilizing them for capacity purposes above the line. We have pretty much utilized every available space that we could in order to accommodate those reductions at K through 3. So what does that translate into? We've already put classes on carts. We've been trying to pull back from that. We've already gone through and doubled up classrooms. We've gone through and we have smaller classes in smaller classrooms. We have teaching assistants. It gets a little bit more challenging once you get to 4th and 5th grade. The students are larger, the furniture is larger, and there's less room to move around in those rooms. So some of the utilization changes that we implemented in order to accommodate K-3 won't be as simple in 4-5. So we also are expecting an increased need in space for pre-K and SPED. So as I talked with Ms. Dawn Dawson, and they're expecting a 15 to 20% increased need for the 23-24 school year. So everybody's competing for those rooms that are below the line on those capacity models. So we don't have an answer right now because that legislation is still in discussion. We know that we'll have to come back, and each school will be a different conversation. As Mr. Haggerty and I spoke as well, we would be looking at resetting capacity models again. We just went through a process of resetting that. So future conversations. Typically, people will throw out, well, let's just switch them all to multi-track year-round. That's not a solution because many of the schools that we're already discussing are already multi-track year-round. I had the question, well, what happens to our CIP? What happens to the schools that you just saw on the list, as Mr. Congdon just showed, that are up and coming? It's basically, it would be a plan, but a reduced availability of capacity for those dollars. So in one example that we discussed earlier, if I were looking at a 616 traditional elementary school, by going through this process and looking at all the changes and needs for a particular elementary school, it could potentially be a reduction down to 576 capacity. So as we're continuing to open new schools, we're opening them but not realizing the capacity that we in long-range planning and student assignment and the rest of the district were anticipating with those new school openings. So that would be a discussion. We would also need to look at whether or not that would change the capacity model and program for some of those upcoming new schools. Because if you'll recall, that's one of the things we did as well. We increased the number of classrooms at some of those newer elementary schools in order to try to get ahead of that seat reduction that I mentioned initially. The longer term impacts. Upcoming assignment plans. We just had that conversation. Ms. Pulliam came and shared that information. Potential reassignments. Again, I just mentioned the challenge at potential unnamed schools going from 3rd grade to 4th grade and not having a seat. Would we be looking at having to do multiple reassignments for students that are going from 3rd to 4th grade to a different school? I'm always coming back talking about capping. Would we then be looking at additional caps at additional schools? We did a trailer 101 in the most recent years. You're aware of the fact that our fleet is getting much older. There are also challenges with some of the placements that we need to make right now in finding the labor to make it happen, getting bidders that are interested in bidding on those projects. So as we are trying to reduce the aging part of our fleet and return some of the leased units, we're finding challenges in being able to make that happen. So trailers is not an instant solution to that crowding issue. One of the things that I read in one of the initial articles said, well, we probably won't need more teachers and we'll probably be okay with the number of classrooms. Well, I think you started with an example a second ago. If I got to split a classroom in two, I don't need one teacher anymore. I now need 2 teachers. So you talked about that with Mr. Slavik a few moments ago with challenges for staff and hiring. I'm not sure where, if it had happened this summer, where we would get all of those additional staff members from, and even giving us a 1-year runway to try to come up with a potential solution would again be a bit of quite a challenge. So the number of teachers, number of teaching spaces, and being able to get that implemented and what the impact would be on the capital improvement program.
Thank you, Ms. Rory. And I bring this up because there's going to be more controversial issues that get headlines, things that people care more about, and they may not be paying attention to something like this. But the actual impacts on our district of what was kind of a small change, just added into the budget, will be huge for us in terms of where our students go to school. What their experience in their schools look like. We've talked about growth, and we know that growth isn't even throughout the county. It's more intense in some areas, right? It's less in some other areas. We just passed a bond to build and renovate new schools, but to build more schools. But even building those new schools, Ms. Rory and I were talking about, if this goes into effect, we'll build more buildings but still lose total capacity. That's how far this puts us back. So there's a lot of issues here. This will start a discussion, and staff's not prepared to go into a lot of detailed analysis yet. They're still looking at the total impacts. But I know a few of you have said you had some initial questions. I saw Ms. Edmonds, and then I saw Chair Mahaffey. And Mr. Carrozza, did you have something?
I just wanted to add something really quick, and I want to be very clear. Who will be impacted by this? Families. And I'll say that one more time. Families will be impacted by this legislation. Because whether it's when you look back at the original implementation of K-3, how we lost several thousand seats, families were impacted. We had to cap more schools. We had to do more reassignments. Families paid that price, and so that's what will happen here.
Okay, Ms. Evans?
Just in case anyone, or to remind us all, when the legislature did the K-3 legislation, they didn't fund it. There was no funding for extra classroom space. There was no funding for the staff required to make it happen. So that was also just egregious and a great, great challenge. And I don't know if, because this is in the House budget, if it's funded. I haven't looked.
Yeah, we don't know yet.
But
I have not found anything.
that's a big unknown and something to be aware of when the K-3 happened. Made it worse.
From what we can see so far, it's just they're going to allot, at 24 per student, which is what they do already now.
Chair Mahaffey?
I mean, the thing that we spoke about when K-3 class size was going on, and the thing that you hear that you're not hearing now is the fact that no one's disagreeing that smaller class sizes are a bad thing. You know, I don't know where these numbers come from of 18, 16, 17 for K-3. I don't know. You know, where 24 comes from, obviously much more manageable than 28, 36. Smaller class sizes are not a bad thing, but the impact that having smaller class sizes has on families, of new families moving to the area needing to be capped out further and further, potential, and I hate to say this because we don't know where this is going to go, but, you know, does this look at calendar changes? Does this look at potential major reassignment changes? That's the piece that I think it's important that our families are aware of so they can get ahead out of, because we know the impact that reassignment has on families when you get notice that you might be going to a new school and it's not because you chose to move, or even if a new school was built, that has an impact on our families, and that trickles down to their kids. And so really it's just making sure that, whereas the other one kind of came out of nowhere, seeing this and now knowing the impact and the lessons from the other one is getting ahead of the game and really making sure, keeping an eye on it, and making sure if you talk to your PTAs or other parents that they're aware that this is a potential thing that's coming down the pipeline.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of big policy issues all related to this, just like K-3 class size, as it comes down. And again, it's not law yet, but I think the sooner that we let people know, the sooner we can start looking at projections. Then once we do know, it'll affect reassignment, it'll affect the CIP, it could affect, I don't know, cost model and program assumptions. I mean, it really could impact everything we do in this committee and then in other committees that you're
Well-intended, but with a lot of negative impacts that we've already seen happen once before.
If you have too many third graders, to Mr. Orr's point, moving into fourth grade classes that aren't there, do you reassign children out of a school they've gone to for kindergarten through third grade? Or do you restrict the number of kindergartner kids coming into the school so that you can take kindergarten classrooms to make fourth and fifth grade classrooms? There's no good options, really. But
The way to restrict would be to cap, so you'd have to have more cap schools around the district.
Which
So there
doesn't
are no
help the
buses.
buses.
Correct.
Which would affect other families in a non-Highland area.
Or
not next month. I
yeah.
think next month, this month's meeting is a little bit later in the month, and we still may not know what's going on with the legislature really until the fall. But we'll talk about bringing back some at another meeting, whether it's in May or later in the summer, once we know a little bit more, so we can sort of talk about if we think that this is, like, for example, if the House budget, which is passed, contained it, and say the Senate passes a budget, they're not reconciled by early summer, but we know both budgets have the same provision and it's unchanged. That suggests there's some, with high confidence, that it'll probably become law. And so that maybe, as we're looking at our reassignment plans 2 years down the line, that might impact reassignment choices we make. That might impact when we look at schools and if we need to make a calendar shift, right? These are all projections. We won't know for sure, but because those changes take time, we need as much lead time as we can get to give families notice, to make staffing changes, and everything that would be involved. So to your point, Ms. Evans, we will be talking about it again, not at the next meeting, but definitely at a future meeting at whatever point we think we have enough information to be able to bring back. Does that sound fair?
And I'm glad you brought up timing, because just to be very aware, staff starts working on the 24-25 enrollment plan over the summer. And if we do not have a final decision on this legislation and it's to be enacted in 24-25, that means at some point during the middle of our enrollment plan discussions with the public, we may have to make changes. So we really need to know this information well in advance so that we can plan for changes that will come up for that next school year.
And then the changes could be so severe, you don't necessarily want to displace people if you don't have to.
Correct.
So where do you draw the line, right? Those are going to be some tough choices.
Maybe offering them to rescind or
Or we're impacting families and you don't ever really need to.
That's that's my point on that. So, all right, does anybody have any questions just in general about this? I wanted to introduce it, give staff enough time so that, we have noticed that this is something that we do want to look at. So, we can look at it more in depth at the appropriate time. Chair
Ms.
Mahaffey?
Rory, can you just repeat the bill number in the section that it's in?
Yes, House Bill 259, I'm looking at version 3, and it is section 7.21D. And if you have the full 404 pages, it starts on page 75.
We can email you a copy of it as well.
Yes.
That'd be great.
This is something that I'll just say, as a district, we had actually looked in moving in the other direction, which was trying to get more flexibility from the K-3 waivers.
Yeah.
Because of the impact that they have on 4 and 5 and on capping and other things. And now, rather than, looking at some situations where we might be granted exceptions, it's gone in the other direction. So, the more that we work with this, the more familiar you'll become with sort of like the talking points and be able to explain it to others. And then, hopefully we can try to balance the, what's good for children, but then what's good for families and their ability to get to school and get to a school in their community. So, okay. All right, well, if there's no other new business items, no one has emailed me or let me know any in advance, then we'll go back to Douglas for our 3-month forecast.
Thank you.
All right, whenever you're...
All right, so you see the 3-month forecast in front of you, everyone, and as we look down the list, certainly you'll know we were here today with you all on the 19th. Next board meeting is next Tuesday on the 25th of April. Of particular note is change order coming for offsite design services for Swift Creek Elementary School. And I would say also some material testing, change order for Rex Road is another one of note for the next board meeting. Then we move into the month of May. First board meeting, May 2. Reconciliation from Skanska, our contractor for Wacom Elementary School, will be coming to that board meeting. So that is certainly of note. We also plan to bring change order number 4 from Skanska, also working on Fuquay Marina Middle School, to that design phase change order 3 for Pleasant Plains Elementary School from the architect. DLR Group would be of note. And then finally, GMP 2 for Rex Road Elementary School will be coming to that meeting. 3 weeks from today, as Mr. Haggerty noted, we will be back, so it's a quick turnaround for the May Facilities Committee meeting. And at present, one agenda item shown, which would be, as we've discussed previously, the 101 for land acquisition. Okay? And I think what we heard discussed this afternoon is the follow-up, a little bit more of a formal discussion and conversation about the 4th and 5th grade capacities would be coming in June, right? That takes us to late May, and some contract amendments, nothing really major at that second board meeting. Then we move into the month of June at that first board meeting, and we have some GMPs coming for Hilltop Meadmore Road Elementary School. And our master agreements will be coming to you. And that really covers the highlights between now and June. Any questions?
Any questions from the committee?
Yeah, I'm just curious, what's up with Apex Friendship High School Stadium? That's a pretty new school. It's on the May 16th repairs.
That, I think, is that track related?
There's a an issue, I think, with the track or with the stands. The underpinning of that was coming apart and had to come back and reduce it.
Got it. Nice.
Got some very excited people in the Pat Pit.
Got it. Ms. Caulfield?
I just noticed Heritage High School's on this, so I just wanted to ask if that, why is it being crossed out?
Crossed out meaning just moving to a later meeting date, meaning it's not quite ready to
Kind of
come to
figured,
you
but
all.
I was just asking, I got a
Sure.
little excited.
Yeah.
It is leaving.
No worries.
And on
Dr. A?
April 25th, Durant Road HVAC, change order, which one is that? Is that Durant Road?
Change order, Durant Road.
Yep, that'll be on consent on Tuesday. And a change order is just when there's a savings or a cost change for any item.
It could mean any change to a contract. It could actually mean an additional cost that we're being charged, or it could mean a credit that's coming back to the district if the scope has changed and maybe something didn't need to be done, or pricing came in better than originally conceived.
What is a fit/finish?
Fit and finish would just mean similar, like going in and doing something along the lines of, it could be painting, could be something, it's not something significant in the sense where we start talking about things like Nate talked about, like with HVAC and structure and roofing. So it's more visual aesthetics in nature.
And then on 620, where it says Transportation Services Bathroom Trailer, is this what we've been for Rock Quarry Road?
It is.
Okay, good. But, uh-oh.
I'm working on another plan as well. I've been going down some parallel paths.
Okay. So this is a stopgap then?
Yes.
Okay.
Be glad to share
Thank you,
some
Mr.
information.
Strickland. I appreciate that.
All right. An active and robust discussion for the 3-month forecast.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
That's right. This way you know we're paying
I
attention.
appreciate that.
Are there any other questions related to the forecast, or can we let Mr. Condon go?
Thank you so
All
much.
right.
You guys are the best. Thank you.
All right. Well, then with that, if there's no further business, I'll call this meeting closed. Thank you very much, everybody.
All right, thank you.